So coming into our yoga for hip and low back this morning, we're going to use a couple of blocks and possibly a strap. So if you can come down onto your back to start. And we're just going to relax the shoulders down and away from the ears, allowing the soles of the feet to rest on the floor, knees bent. Maybe turning the palms up toward the ceiling and kind of walking your shoulder blades together a little bit. And just begin to tune into the breath here, noticing that inhale through the nose and exhale through the nose. Begin to soften the jaw, relaxing the neck, the throat. Noticing the rising and the falling of the chest or the belly. And try to make your exhale slightly longer than your inhale. So breathing into a count of 3 and exhaling to a count of 5. And when you feel ready, you can walk your feet out to the edge of your yoga mat and just take your arms out into a T position. Palms can face the floor. And just begin to rock the knees from side to side, gently massaging that low back, finding some movement in the hips and the spine. And then coming back up to center here, we're going to heel toe your feet back into the middle of the mat, crisscrossing right foot over left knee and gently pressing that knee open and away from you. Maybe rock your knee from side to side, kind of cradling that leg. Finding a moment of stillness here and then uncrossing that foot, taking left foot over right knee now. Gently pressing that knee open. You can use your hand to guide that knee. Take a deep breath in. And on your exhale, you can begin to rock that knee from side to side, just cradling that leg. And then let's find some stillness here, releasing that foot back down to the floor. You're going to take your hands down by your hips, walk your heels up toward your seat, and we're going to inhale to press the hips up toward the ceiling, taking a bridge pose here. Nice and gentle, and then releasing to come back down. Let's get those arms involved, just warming up the back of the body. We're going to inhale, float the arms up as you lift the hips up, and then exhale, releasing the hands down as you float the arms or float the hips down. Let's take that 2 more times, working with the breath here. Great job. Bringing the soles of the feet together, we're going to let the knees fall open for a moment. Just taking a moment here in this restorative pose to get into the inner thigh, the hips. If this is causing you a lot of discomfort, you actually can grab your yoga blocks and prop them underneath your thighs to give you some support. If you want a little more overpressure, you can rest the hands on the inner thighs. Take a deep breath in. And on your next exhale, using your hands to guide your knees back up to the center here. We're going to work our way, moving with intention, moving with ease onto the hands and knees. Okay, I'm going to turn this way here because that's where my blocks are. We're going to stack the arms, the shoulders over the wrists, and the hips over the knees, dropping that belly down. Inhale to look up, and then exhale, rounding that spine to look down. Taking a couple of cat-cows here, working with your own breath, working with your own movements. And then finding a moment of stillness here, we're going to extend that right leg back behind you, drawing that belly button up and in to try to flatten out the low back and really squeezing that back of the body. Reaching the left hand up to Create a long line from the tip of the finger all the way down to the heel. And then exhale, releasing that hand down to the ground, shifting your weight onto the right knee now, extending left leg back behind you, and floating that arm up overhead, gently drawing that belly button into the spine. And then exhale, releasing hand to floor, taking knee down to floor. We're going to widen your knees, bringing the toes together, and send the hips back so you can rest your belly down between the thighs for our child's pose here. If it feels better to use a yoga block to bring the floor up to you, sometimes this is nice because it creates a little bit of alignment in the low back. But whatever feels good for you, whatever you like. So the objective here is to try to release into the hips, try to let go, and just begin to rock the forehead from side to side, massaging that space between the eyebrows. And then finding some stillness here, taking a breath in and a breath out. If you used a block, you can move that off to the side now. But we're going to walk our fingertips out, straightening out those elbows, coming up onto the fingertips, kind of tenting the hands. And peel your forehead off of the floor if it isn't already. Go ahead and walk your fingertips off to the right side of your mat, rooting that left hip down to the ground. Walking those fingers back through center here and off to the left side of your mat. Gently pressing that right hip down to the ground, creating length throughout the right side of the body. Coming back through center here, we're going to press it back up into our tabletop, taking shoulders over wrists and getting those hips over the knees again. Shifting your hips off to the right side of your mat, go ahead and take your gaze over that right shoulder, and then come back through center, taking the hips off to the left. Alternating between right and left here, creating the side bending motion in the body. And then finding your center. We're going to rock the hips back, kind of towards child's pose, and then inhale to press it back up to tabletop. Just taking our hip mobility matrix here. So getting into all of the quadrants of the hip. You're going to take a couple of rounds here. And then coming back up into tabletop, let's step your right leg off to the side. Foot is flat and your toe points forward. And we're going to begin to rock back and forth. Feeling that stretch throughout the inner leg. Trying to keep that knee straight. And then releasing that knee underneath the hip, extending your left leg out long. Toe is pointed forward, that foot is flat. And we'll begin to rock it back and forth. Great job. Releasing that knee back under the hip, we're going to come into a tall kneeling position. Stepping your left foot out to the side, toe turns out, and aligning that knee over the ankle. Hands can come to hips. We want to keep the hips squared to the front of the mat and shift over and back. So not leaning too much with the upper body, not relying on the elbow to be on the thigh, but actually getting that movement in the hip joints. And then releasing that leg out to the side, we're going to straighten the knee. Once again, trying to get that foot flat, toe pointing forward. Placing your hand on the leg, and then inhale to float that right arm up and over for a nice side body stretch. Taking a few deep breaths here. And then inhale to lift up, rooting that right hand down to the ground, floating left hand up and over. Find a breath, and then inhale to come back up. Stacking that hip over the knee once again and sending your right leg out to the side. Sorry, bending the knee, turning that toe out. Hands come to hips as you keep the hips squared to the front of your mat. Begin to shift over and back. Just opening up that hip here. Great job. Extend that leg out to the side. Foot is flat, toe points forward. We're taking that right hand down to the knee and inhale, floating that right arm up and over for a side body stretch. And then taking that hand down to the floor, we'll inhale to sweep your right hand up and over. Finding a breath here. Great job. And then releasing. We are going to come down into a seated position here. Okay, so your feet are long on the mat. All right, so taking the legs out wide, we're turning the knees up toward the ceiling, keeping those toes pointed up. We're going to inhale to grow tall in the spine, and then exhale to hinge forward at the hips. Keeping that chest lifted, keeping it nice and proud. Continue to breathe here. So you exhale, release, coming into that a little deeper. And then go ahead and walk your feet or your hands up, coming up into that wide-legged seated position here. So taking your left leg, bend your knee and bring the sole of the foot to the inner thigh. Okay. Taking the back of the hand to the inside of the knee, we're going to float that left arm up and over. So imagine rooting that right hip to the ground. So this particular pose, we're trying to get into a muscle called the quadratus lumborum. That's typically that muscle that grips if you're having low back pain. So we want to stretch that carefully. But in order to do that, that upper shoulder, we want to bring it back. So we're looking up and underneath. Okay, so we're truly getting a side bending motion and not collapsing forward. All right, so inhale to lift up. We're taking a little variation here in our poses. So propping your left hand behind you, we're going to press into that hand and send the hips up. So we're kind of coming onto that leg that's kickstanded. Reaching your right hand up to the ceiling, pressing those hips forward to really get some length throughout the body. If this is giving you any discomfort in the back, please come out of it. And then exhale, releasing the hips down to the ground, and we can swap out our legs. So bringing the sole of the right foot in, flipping those toes up, taking the back of the hand to the inside of the knee, and reaching your right arm up and over. Once again, rooting that right hip down into the ground. Breathing into that rib space, trying to keep your shoulder open. And then lifting up and out of that, we're going to kickstand your right hand back behind you, sweeping that left arm up as you prop it up onto the shin. Press your hips forward as you look up and back, if that feels okay on your low back and your neck. Getting a little bit of weight bearing on the arms. And then exhale, releasing the hips down to the ground. We're going to come back into our tabletop position here. Index fingers face forward, spreading those fingertips out. Let's tuck the toes. And we're going to send the hips up and back into your first downward dog. So trying to keep those knees bent pretty generously here and dive that chest down toward your thighs. We can alternate pedaling those heels out to create length in the back of the leg. And then finding a moment of stillness. Maybe you can straighten those legs out a little bit more. Taking your gaze up between the hands, go ahead and walk your feet up to meet your hands at the top of your mat. Inhale, coming up into a flat back, taking hands to shins. Loop those shoulders down and back and draw that chin in to create length in the back of the neck. Exhale, sweeping those arms up overhead, lacing the fingers together. Index finger points up to the ceiling. We're going to take a little back bend here and then come back up. Bringing your hands to heart center. Let's shift your weight onto the left leg, taking our tree pose. So sole of the foot comes to the inner shin or the inner thigh, wherever you are today. We're imagining that we're rooting down into the ground, lifting up through the top of the head. Okay, so all about transition here. We're not bringing that foot down to the floor, but we're going to step it back into our warrior two. So aligning the heel with the arch of the back foot. Dropping that knee over ankle, reaching fingertips out long. Try to relax your shoulders down and away from the ears. Embrace your core. So imagine somebody's coming up to kind of tap you in the belly and you want to brace for impact. Go ahead and flip that front palm, exhale, reverse warrior, taking your back hand to your back knee, reaching those fingertips up to the ceiling. Continue sinking down into that front thigh. And let's come back through center and take your front elbow to front knee for our extended side angle, taking that arm up overhead to frame the ear. Try to drop the rib cage down a little bit so that we're not rounding too much, but rather we're keeping the right shoulder or your left shoulder drawn away from the ear. Okay, go ahead and pivot on that back foot to take a nice low lunge here. You can use your blocks to bring the floor up to you. Okay, so peeling that chest up, looking forward, but try to keep that back knee straight so we can create length throughout the hip. Okay, allowing that front knee to come down, untucking the toe. We're going to sweep those arms up overhead for a moment, just feeling that stretch throughout the front of that leg. Exhale, release those hands down to the ground. We're going to take your yoga block that's inside the arch of the foot and place that on its lowest side. Placing your right hand on the block, let's move the other one out of the way and heel toe your left foot off to the side of your mat, okay? So we're going to take your elbow to the inside of the knee and gently press it open. So we're trying to get what's called external rotation of the hip, just kind of opening up the hip in a different way. Maybe you can use your hands to work that hip open coming up to the outer edge of the foot. And then releasing that pressure, let's heel toe your foot back to center. We're going to tuck that back toe, hover the knee, and then sweep that left arm up, taking a spinal twist. Continue to find that breath. This gets a little bouncy, so be mindful there. And then exhale, releasing that twist, moving your block off the mat. We're going to plant the hands down, step it back, high plank. Press the floor away from you, reaching that heart space up to the ceiling before you send the hips up and back into our downward dog. Maybe you can find a little more motion in the back of the legs, straightening out those knees. Heels don't need to come down to the floor. Taking your gaze up between the hands, go ahead and march your feet up to meet the hands. Inhale, coming to our flat back. Finding some stillness here as you are building strength in the back of the body. And then exhale, sweep those arms up overhead, taking the hands to heart center in our mountain pose. Shifting your weight onto your right leg, taking the sole of the foot to the inner shin or the inner thigh for our tree pose. Finding that drishti here, that focal point in front of you. If you wish, you can reach those arms up overhead, but try to relax the shoulders down and away from the ears. Bring your hands back to heart center if they aren't already. And transitioning into our warrior two, we're immediately stepping that left foot back, bending that front knee and trying to align the heel with the arch of the back foot. Stacking the knee over the ankle, go ahead and float your fingertips out. Try to draw that belly button into the spine to flatten out that back, but keep the shoulders soft away from the ears. Let's flip your front palm up to the ceiling and exhale, reverse warrior, taking your back hand to the back knee. But imagine reaching those fingertips up toward the ceiling. Let's take your arms back to warrior two and bringing front elbow to front knee, reaching that arm up overhead to frame the ear. So imagine dropping your rib cage down. So that's going to give you this sensation almost like you're kind of plugging the shoulder into its socket. So that's creating length throughout the side of the body here. We're going to pivot on that back foot to come down into your runner's lunge, heel toeing that foot off to the side slightly so that you can get your feet on railroad tracks, setting yourself up for good balance here. If you want to use your blocks on the tall side to bring the floor up to you, go ahead and press the hands into the blocks, peeling the chest off of the floor, trying to keep that back leg straight so we can access that range of motion in the front of the hip. Okay, softly lower that back knee to the floor and untuck the toe. We're going to take that block that's on the inner arch of the foot and lay it down on its lowest side and move the other block off the mat. Go ahead and heel toe your right leg off to the outer edge of your mat. So gently press that elbow into the knee to open up throughout the hip. So this shouldn't feel like you're stressing the hip or the low back too much. So if it does, just come out of it. But if you feel like you need a little more pressure, you can press on that knee with the hand to open it up. Releasing the hand, go ahead and walk your foot into the center here again. We're going to place the left hand on your block, tuck the back toe, hover the knee, sweeping that right arm up overhead to take a gentle twist. Releasing that hand, moving your block off to the side. We're going to plant the hands on the floor, stepping that right foot back, high plank. Lowering the knees down to the ground, we're going to spiral the elbow creases to face forward. Bending those elbows, we're going to lower it down onto the belly, allowing the elbows to graze the rib cage. Take a moment here to just let the forehead melt into the floor. Pausing to find your breath. Placing your hands underneath the shoulders, we're going to loop the shoulders down and back, gently peeling the chest up off of the floor, taking the gaze forward slightly. The objective here is to try to allow the back muscles to relax a little bit, and we're actually engaging the shoulder blade muscles. Okay, so that might mean that your chest comes down toward the floor a little more, and that's completely okay. And then exhale, release, taking the forehead to the floor. So we're just going to alternate bending the knee, taking a bend of the left knee and straightening it, and then bend of the right knee and straightening it. So just trying to explore our knee range of motion in this pose, because our quadriceps, so the muscles in the front of the thigh, actually attach below the knee and above the hip. So when we say hip flexor tightness, we're actually talking about this muscle, so the top of the muscle, and then some other ones. Okay, so coming up into Cobra and allowing the elbows to come onto the mat, we're going to bend that left knee and imagine you're pressing your pubic bone down into the mat below you. So it's going to give you a different sensation as we take up more of that space. And then release that foot to the floor, taking the other leg, pressing that pubic bone down into the ground, and then release. We're going to take that one more time on each side. And release. Great job. So placing your hands underneath the shoulders, we're going to send the hips up and back and come back into our resting child's pose, taking forehead to the floor and finding some nice long breaths here. And just let go, let go, let go. Working your way back up to your tabletop, we're going to align ourselves to come back into our downward facing dog. Let's tuck the toes, send the hips up and back. Dropping those heels down toward the floor. They don't have to reach the floor completely. Take your gaze up between the hands. We're going to walk the feet up to meet the hands at the top of your mat. Inhale, coming up to our flat back. Exhale to sweep the hands up overhead. And we're actually going to bring the hands to heart center and step your left foot or your back foot toward the back of the mat, opening up into our standing wide angle pose. So turning those toes out slightly. We're going to, actually you might want to grab your blocks here. Okay, so have those blocks handy. We're going to inhale to float those arms up overhead into our 5-pointed star. Take a deep breath in. On your exhale, taking the hands down to the floor, hinging forward at the hips. Trying to keep those knees straight, maybe wiggling the hips from side to side. Maybe walking your toes away from you if you need a little more movement here in the hips. Rooting your right hand down onto the block. Inhale, float your left hand up toward the ceiling. Trying to keep those hips level. And then release that twist, taking left hand to the block. Inhale to float that right hand up, trying to keep the hips level. And then release that twist. We're going to heel toe your feet in a little bit. So keeping that turn out. Let's stack one yoga block on top of the other and place it between the heels and slide it back slightly so that our bottoms can come down onto those blocks. So we're going to come up to a standing here. Okay, let's bring your hands to heart center as we begin to drop the hips down, 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 down to your yoga block so that you can sit right down on them. So coming into Malasana or yogic squat, we're gently pressing the elbows into the knees, keeping those palms pressing against each other. So imagine pulling your chest through the shoulders, kind of lifting up. Opening up those hips. And take a couple of breaths here, trying to relax the pelvic floor. Trying to grow tall through the crown of the head. And then we'll release the hands to the floor. And then there's no graceful way to do this. We're going to come down onto the knees here using the length of your mat. So it's kind of taking your tabletop and turning it sideways. Coming into frog pose, we're going to walk the knees out from each other, trying to get into those inner thighs. Okay? So frog pose is one that you kind of work yourself into. So finding a spot that's comfortable, but you still feel a stretch, but it's not too intense that you can't stay there for a moment. So when you find that, go ahead and come down onto the forearms. And imagine shifting your hips forward a little bit. So that's going to align the hips so that we can actually get into those adductor muscles, so the muscles inside the thigh. If you take a peek back behind you, we want to have the shins parallel. So that means that the ankle is in line with the knee on both sides. If you need a little bit of support, you can actually use your blocks or a couple blankets to build up the floor to support your kind of in that groin area. After you're here for a couple of breaths, you might notice that you can get into the pose a little deeper. So taking the knees farther away from each other if you feel like that's accessible to you. It's not necessary though. And continue to breathe here. And coming up onto the hands to come out of frog pose. You're going to bend the knees to bring the feet together and then inch your knees together. Feet together, knees together until finally you get into your tabletop position. Great job. So take a couple of rounds of cat-cow here once you get out of that pose, just to get some mobility back into the spine. And then you're going to come down into a seat. So extending those legs out long. And let your yoga strap be handy as we work our way down onto our backs. So drawing the toes up to the shins, we're sitting up tall through the crown of the head, and then exhaling to hinge forward at the hips to create length, this lengthening throughout the back of the leg. Notice that the chest is still proud here, so we're not rounding and collapsing forward. Continue to breathe here. And then working your way back up to sitting. We're going to hug your left knee into the chest, sitting up tall and proud here. Go ahead and hover that right leg off of the ground. And we're just going to draw a line up and down for about 10 repetitions. And then we're going to go side to side for 10. 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10. Great job. Release that foot to the floor. Crisscross that foot over the knee. We're going to hug your knee and take a twist to the left. Kickstanding that hand back behind you, growing tall through the crown of the head. Breathing in, taking up all of that rib space, and then exhaling to deepen your twist. Go ahead and release that twist, extending that leg out long and bouncing those knees just to get some blood flow back into that hip joint. Hugging your right knee into the chest. We're sitting up tall through the crown of the head. Go ahead and hover that left leg, and we're elevating it up and down for 10. And then side to side for 10. 9 and 10. Releasing that foot to the floor. Go ahead and crisscross your foot over the knee. We're going to hug your knee and take a twist to the right now, kickstanding that hand back behind you. Expanding across the chest, so really pulling that shoulder blade down and back. Breathing into that rib cage, 360 degrees. And then exhaling to deepen the twist. So releasing that twist, we're going to extend that leg out long, bouncing the knees. Okay. So reaching one hand and then the other hand back behind you. Bend your right leg. And then you're going to crisscross that left foot over the leg. So this can be kind of an intense stretch. So there's a couple of variations here where you walk the foot forward to get the foot on top of the knee, and then you bend the knee. Or you can kind of lift your butt up in the air to crisscross over and then sit down into it. So however you need to get there, and finding a position that you can tolerate that doesn't feel like too much strain. Okay. And when you find that place, you can kind of inch your heel back towards your butt a little bit, and that's going to gradually increase that range of motion in the hip. Okay. As you start to get into this pose a little more, we want to keep the toes turned up toward the shins so that we can protect the knee joint. Okay. Take a deep inhale. Exhale. One more inhale. And on your exhale, release that foot down to the floor. Go ahead and walk your feet out away from you slightly. Wonderful job. So crisscrossing the right foot over the left knee now. You might have to kind of wiggle your seat a little bit to find a spot that feels comfortable for you. So as you start to find that spot, let's turn the toes up toward the shins to protect the knee. And maybe you want to walk your foot up towards your seat a little bit. Taking some nice long breaths here. Through the nose, out the nose. And on your next exhale, go ahead and release that foot down to the ground here. Grabbing onto the backs of the feet, we're sitting up nice and tall. creating length in the back of the body. Reaching your fingertips out in front of you, begin to lower down to the floor. When you get about halfway, try to keep that length through the top of the head and hold. Kind of invite that muscle contraction as difficulty here. And then exhale, release slowly with control, 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 control all the way down to the ground until you can finally release the arms and let go, bending the knees. Taking a deep breath in through the nose and letting go through the mouth. Softening the neck, the shoulders. Returning to a natural breath. Grabbing onto your yoga strap, we're going to loop that strap around the ball of the right foot, okay? Drawing the toes up toward the shins. We're trying to straighten that right knee, so that means that we want to keep that right knee as straight as we can, even if that means the knee or the leg has to come closer to the floor, okay? Anchoring your left hip to the ground, go ahead and lower that right leg out to the side. If you start to feel your left hip pop up off of the ground, you've gone too far, and try to bring that leg back up to get the hip on the ground. It's going to require a little bit of core activation. Imagine plugging your shoulder into its socket so that you're not hanging out on the shoulder joint with that, holding that yoga strap. Finding your breath here, relaxing the jaw. On your next inhale, come back up to center, and then exhale, release the foot to the floor. Great job. Taking the other side, we're going to loop the strap around the ball of the left foot. Taking a moment to align that. And then we're going to straighten the knee, drawing the toes up to the shins. Again, trying to get that knee straight, even if it means that you are lowering the leg down to the floor. On your next exhale, let's lower that leg out to the side, keeping that right hip pinned to the ground. If you notice it start to pop up off of the floor, try to lower it back down, even if that leg comes back up to center. Plugging that shoulder in so that we're not hanging out on the shoulder joint. And then inhale, come back up to center. Exhale, release the foot out of your strap, and you can move that yoga strap off to the side. Okay. Now grabbing a block. Okay, bent knees. We're going to place the block between the knees, gently pressing the knees into the block. We're going to send the hips up into our bridge pose, lacing the fingers underneath the hips, and begin to snuggle the shoulder blades together to expand across the chest. Squeezing those glutes, squeezing your block. And we're here for 3, 2, 1. Exhale, release the hands and lower, 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 one spinal segment at a time. Moving your block off to the side. You can begin to windshield wiper knees from side to side. Maybe you want to take a gentle spinal twist to one side. And then the other side. Taking any other stretch or pose that you feel like your body might need before coming into our Shavasana. Once you're ready, you can extend the legs out long, just allowing the toes to fall open, relaxing the hips. Hands can rest on the belly or down by your side with the palms facing up. Begin to notice the rising and the falling of the chest and belly with every inhale and the exhale. Soften the forehead. Let the eyelids become heavy, letting the eyes sink back into their sockets. Soften the jaw and relax the tongue and the mouth. Relax the throat, the shoulders, Feeling the weight of the arms as they melt into the floor. Take your attention to the hips, the low back, and the pelvic area. And try to relax and release with every exhale. Feeling the weight of the legs as they melt into the floor below you. Taking your attention now to the breath. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, just feeling that natural state, that natural rhythm. And if your mind starts to wander, kindly bring the attention back to the breath. Taking one deep inhale and an exhale to let it all go. Begin to make small movements with the fingers, with the toes, just to invite some movement back into the body. When you feel ready, you can roll over onto your side, propping yourself up to a seated position, moving with ease. And once you get there, imagine rooting those sits bones down into the ground below you and growing tall through the crown of the head. Bringing your hands to prayer position in front of the heart and just taking a moment to show yourself some gratitude.